Have you ever experienced a coincidence so powerful it felt like reality itself was responding to your inner world? You think of someone you have not spoken to in years, and they call within the hour. You are wrestling privately with a specific question, and a stranger says the exact answer out loud in a conversation you happen to overhear. These moments feel like more than chance, and Carl Jung, one of history's most respected psychiatrists, took this feeling seriously enough to build an entire concept around it, one he considered genuinely important rather than simply superstitious. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, and he defined it with real precision, a meaningful coincidence between an inner psychological state and an outer external event, where the two are not connected by ordinary cause and effect, but are connected instead by shared meaning. This is a considerably more careful claim than simply saying everything happens for a reason. Jung was not proposing that the outer event was caused by the inner state, the way one physical event causes another. He was proposing something stranger and, in his understanding, more interesting, that meaning itself can sometimes organize events across the boundary between inner experience and outer reality, without requiring one to directly cause the other at all. Jung arrived at this idea partly through his clinical work, encountering patients whose inner psychological processes seemed to coincide with startling and specific regularity with external events that had no ordinary causal connection to what was happening in their minds. He also arrived at it through his broader theoretical work on the collective unconscious, the shared universal layer of the psyche he believed underlies all individual minds. If this deeper layer genuinely connects all individual psyches to something considerably larger than any single person's private mental life, Jung reasoned, it should not be entirely surprising that this same deeper layer might also, on occasion, produce meaningful connections between inner psychological states and outer physical events, since both, in his understanding, in the end arise from the same underlying source. Here is what makes this concept genuinely useful, rather than simply an interesting historical curiosity, regardless of where you personally land on its more mystical implications. Jung believed that synchronistic events tend to cluster specifically around moments of genuine psychological significance, periods of real transition, real crisis, or real active inner work, rather than occurring randomly and evenly throughout an ordinarily unremarkable stretch of life. This suggests, at minimum, that these experiences function as a kind of psychological signal, marking moments when something genuinely significant is actively unfolding within a person's inner life, whether or not you accept Jung's fuller, more metaphysical explanation for why the outer coincidence occurred alongside it. This explains why so many people report a marked increase in these meaningful coincidences during periods of major life transition, a significant loss, a major decision, the early stages of genuine psychological change. Jung's understanding suggests this is not simply because a person becomes more alert to coincidences during emotionally heightened periods, though this alone would be a genuinely reasonable explanation. It suggests something further, that periods of genuine psychological significance actually correlate with an increased frequency of these meaningfully connected events, as though the psyche's own heightened activity during these periods somehow participates in organizing the external world around the same significant meaning. Whether or not you accept this fuller, more mystical dimension of Jung's theory, there is real practical value in taking synchronistic experiences seriously as psychological information, even from a considerably more conservative standpoint. A powerful coincidence that feels meaningful is, at the very least, reliable evidence about what your own psyche currently considers significant, since the mind does not register an ordinary, forgettable event with this kind of weight and attention. If a specific coincidence feels this striking, this is worth actually examining as information about your own current inner state, regardless of whether you attribute the external half of the coincidence to genuine synchronicity or simply to heightened attention during a significant period. Here is what actually helps in working with this concept practically. When a genuinely striking coincidence occurs, it helps to pause and ask directly what inner question, worry, or transition you were actually holding at that exact moment, since the specific content of the coincidence often points toward exactly what your own psyche is currently actively working through. This does not require believing in any specific metaphysical mechanism behind the coincidence. It simply requires taking your own psyche's evident sense of significance seriously as genuine information rather than dismissing the experience entirely as meaningless chance the moment it produces something uncomfortable or difficult to explain through ordinary means. There is a second practical use worth naming. Jung believed that dreams and waking synchronicities often work together, each illuminating the other, and a person actively engaged in dream work or active imagination often notices these meaningful outer coincidences increasing specifically during the same period this inner work is actively underway. This suggests that synchronicity may function in part as external confirmation that genuine, significant inner work is actually occurring, a kind of outer echo of an inner process that might otherwise remain difficult to verify or trust. If you have experienced a coincidence powerful enough that it genuinely unsettled you, hear this clearly. Jung took this exact experience seriously enough to build one of his most enduring theoretical contributions around it, and dismissing it entirely as meaningless chance may actually discard genuinely useful information about what your own inner life is currently actively working through. Think honestly about the most striking coincidence you have ever personally experienced and consider what inner question, worry, or transition you were actually holding at the exact moment it occurred. Right below the single word for what that coincidence seemed to actually be telling you or confirming at the time. Naming it honestly is the real and practical way you begin taking Jung's understanding of synchronicity seriously, not necessarily as mystical proof of anything beyond ordinary explanation, but as genuine information about your own significant, active inner life. Because a coincidence powerful enough to genuinely unsettle you was never, according to Carl Jung's understanding, something to dismiss automatically as meaningless chance. It was, at minimum, a reliable signal that something genuinely significant was actively unfolding within you, and at most, exactly the kind of meaningful connection between inner and outer reality that Jung spent considerable effort trying to understand.